member of the notorious MS-13 gang, is on trial for some brutal murders. Homa?
And guys, 6 murders in 5 years. That is what this man is accused of. 5 of those deaths here in Fairfax County, 1 in Massachusetts. Today is day 4 of this trial, and the details in these court documents and inside this courtroom, they are truly gruesome. Now, prosecutors say 27-year-old Elmer Alascandre, seen here, is from El Salvador and a high-ranking member of the MS-13 gang, and that these killings happened between 2018 and 2022 in Northern Virginia. The descriptions of the murders, they are heinous. Stabbings, shootings, body parts cut off and discarded or buried. The victims range in age from a 19-year-old waitress in Fairfax, shot 16 times in the face, to a 42-year-old alleged fellow gang member. Fox 5 covered one of the deaths extensively. 24-year-old Jose Guillen Mahia, whose body was found in 2019 in the woods off a walking trail in Reston. Now, at the time, police did not believe his death was gang-related. But according to prosecutors, Mahia was simply the first person that Condre and his fellow associates saw in the woods in an area they considered their turf. Condre is also accused of distributing cocaine and marijuana throughout Virginia and elsewhere. He's facing murder, racketeering, and firearms charges. If convicted on all counts, he could face up to life in prison.
Imagine being hunted by another person. You might think that only happens in movies or in countries you would never visit. But it was happening in Virginia. Is Elmer Alascandre, also known as Bucky, one of MS-13's most dangerous men to walk the streets? The feds claim he was the devil incarnate, and that taking lives was nothing but everyday business for Elmer and his homies. The Mara Salvatrucha, also known as MS-13, is a gang composed primarily of immigrants or descendants of immigrants from Central America, with members operating in many cities in the United States, the land of the free and the home of the brave. You might not be safe. Elmer would set his sights on the Commonwealth of Virginia, Fairfax County, Prince William County, Alexandria, and even Richmond. In his mind, this would be his place. He would run the show over here. He would be the shot caller, at least for his gang. Although you might not have known much about them in the 80s, the feds say they were here. MS-13 would originate in Los Angeles, California, where MS-13 members would brand together for protection against more established gangs in the area, like the Crips and the Bloods. MS-13 quickly would spread to states across the country. You see them in New York and Washington, D.C., and Texas and Virginia. MS-13 was a transnational criminal organization and is and was one of the largest street gangs in the U.S. Gang members actively recruit members, including juveniles, from communities with a large number of Central American immigrants. Members of MS-13 from time to time would signify their membership by wearing tattoos, reading Mara Salvatrucha, MS or MS-13. Most of the time, they're written in Gothic lettering. Members would also signify their membership through tattoos of devil horns in various places on their bodies. Sometimes members want to avoid being labeled as MS-13 members, and instead of wearing these discreet tattoos, they would wear them on their forehead like a 503, a spider web, or 3 dots in a triangle formation, signifying mi vida loca, their crazy lives, or clown faces with phrases such as laugh now, cry later. And it's almost always cry later, and Elmer will find out soon. Some MS-13 members choose not to have tattoos at all, or placed on areas such as the hairline where they can be easily covered, in order to conceal their gang affiliation from law enforcement. The gang colors of MS-13 are blue, black, and white, and members often wear clothing, particularly sports jerseys with the number 13, or with numbers that, when added together, will total 13, such as a 7 and a 6. MS-13 members also wear blue and white clothing to represent their membership, including blue and white shoes, such as the Night Cortez. As with tattoos, some MS-13 members select more discreet ways of dressing in order to signify their membership, and at the same time avoid detection by law enforcement. MS-13 members refer to one another by their gang monikers, or takas, and often do not know fellow gang members except by their gang names. Members of MS-13 are expected to protect the name, the reputation, and status of the gang from rival gang members and other persons. And if you disrespect, Elmer will send people to take your life. MS-13 members required that all individuals show respect and deference to the gang and its membership. To protect the gang and to enhance its reputation, MS members are expected to use any means necessary to force respect from those who show disrespect, including acts of intimidation and violence. Members and associates of MS-13 engage in criminal activity according to the feds that is not limited to murder, assault, and drug trafficking, as well as attempts to aid conspiracies, to commit such offenses. MS-13 members and associates are required to commit acts of violence to maintain membership and discipline within the gang. And if you want to rise in the ranks, violence is always an option. One of the principal rules of MS-13 was and is that its members must attack and kill rivals whenever possible. Rivals are often referred to as chavalas. MS-13 in the area of Fairfax County, Virginia, maintained rivalries with, among others, the 18th Street gang. But 18th Street are not the only people on the menu. Anyone could get in. Within MS-13, the primary unit of organizations is known as a clique. That is a smaller group operating in a specific city or region. Cliques operate under the umbrella rules of MS-13. MS-13 cliques often work together to engage in criminal activity and to assist one another in avoiding detection by law enforcement. In and around Virginia, these cliques include, among others, the Unions, the ULS, or the Unions Locos Salvatruchas. And Elmer had his own clique. He was at the top of the list of the ULS clique of MS-13 in Virginia. Each clique is presided over by the first word, the leader or the president of the clique. The leader was also sometimes referred to as the primera. The second word was the second in command of the clique. General members are required to take orders from the first word and second word. Elmer, aka Bucky, was the big jefe, and his right-hand man, Henry Ayala, aka Little Player, was the second in command, the second jefe, or the second boss. Together, the two would wreak havoc on Virginia. They would send their underlings to devastate those around them. On June 22, 2019, Elmer would summon his soldiers to a hotel room to plan ending someone's life. He wanted to see where the heart of his men were. He had already committed a murder in 2018 in mass. On June 23, 2019, Bucky, Elmer, and Kasuko, Chino, and another soldier, Dexter, set out on their earlier planned mission. With a 9mm tucked in his waist and a .45 and at least one machete, the young men set out to fuck their lives off in a way that they could never imagine. They were on their way to Hunter Woods, an area in Reston, Virginia. The homies would run up on Lorenzo Gulian Mejias and say something in Spanish, telling him that he should not be in the woods smoking and drinking, and for it he was going to die. Elmer was pissed off that people were disrespecting the woods that he felt he lived in, the woods that he felt he controlled. Before Mejias could protest, the first shots that would take his life were pounded into his body. The gangsters would run off into the night, hearts pounding, scared and excited. They had just ended their own lives, but they never knew it. Jose was left in a cluster of garbage and beer cans to die. People would hear the shots fired around 1:45 a.m., and they would call the cops. Sirens would fill the air, piercing people's ears as they slept. There, the cops would find Lorenzo Gulian Mejias, his body riddled with bullets. No one could save him. It was all over now. Blood leaked from his body, painting a picture of a young life lost far too early. Hunter Woods was becoming exactly what it was called, a hunting ground for Elmer and his homies. Kasuko knew 19-year-old Iris Ponce Garcia was a chavala, or at least he felt that way, and he was ready to line her up, and that he did. He would stalk her on social media, garnering her attention and her respect. She was at one time disrespecting MS-13 in social media videos, and now the 19-year-old waitress would pay for her sins in a brutal way. She didn't know the man she was talking to was actually MS-13. The two would exchange messages on Snapchat, and he would set her up for the kill, literally. On September 17, 2020, 19-year-old Iris would become nothing more than a memory. Kasuko would show up where the two planned to meet, but with him was some of the homies. And she too would feel the wrath of MS-13 when the heat from the lead entered her body, claiming her life. She knew in that moment that he was MS-13, and that the video she had made, disrespecting MS, would now be her demise. 16 shots would be fired into her face, leaving her unrecognizable. Iris would lay on the ground bleeding out for hours before someone found her as they drove by for work at 7 a.m. in the morning. Elmer and the crew were stacking up bodies. No one was off limits. On September 26, 2020, Elmer's right-hand man, Kasuko, together they were planning the next hit, but he had to get permission from the big bosses himself. He would send a message on WhatsApp thinking the cops can't read those messages, but certainly they can. The message contained two requests addressed to MS-13 leadership seeking authorization to murder someone they would call OGM and Raps. The request to murder OGM was based on OGM's sales of weed and cocaine on ULS's perceived territory, and OGM's calls to the police about at least one ULS homeboy they had labeled OGM a rat. The request to murder Raps stated that Raps stole from stores and caused problems that brought an unwanted police presence to ULS's perceived turf, and that rap sold drugs with OGM. These requests had to be approved in El Salvador by the big homies. Numerous requests were being sent to eliminate people, and Elmer would keep those handwritten requests on notebooks that the cops would later find when they kicked his door in. On November 22nd, 2020, Bucky and his right-hand man, Kasuko, Mr. Barrera, further discussed killing another homie, DAA, via WhatsApp. On or about November 25th, 2025, Elmer would message his right-hand man, Kasuko, on WhatsApp and told him that MS-13 leadership had finally approved their request to murder DAA. The plan was in motion, as there was what they called a green light to end DAA's life. The green light meant it was a go, but finding him was not easy. Plans were made to eliminate people, and permissions were given, but finding the victims that were their targets was not always easy. On March 11, 2021, in Reston, Virginia, the crew would show up at an apartment complex on Winter 3rd Court in Reston, Virginia. Elmer would tell his homies, "I'm gonna show you how the motherfucking Hefe gets busy." There, Elmer would add notches to his belt as he pulled his pistol from his waist. He was becoming a serial killer, and he would unleash numerous shots into Antonio Trejo Loomis. His homies would watch on and laugh as he committed the vicious act that only God should possess, the act of ending another life. But others that were in the path of Elmer would also find the same fate. The killing machine was not done. 27-year-old Rene Pineda Sanchez would find himself by himself when the homies would find him hanging out in the woods that would become a violent place. Gang members would beat the man so badly that a medical examiner said he looked like the victim of a car wreck, with ruptured internal organs and a crushed skull that they caved in with a rock. One of their own would also be on the menu, 42-year-old Francisco Avalier Rivera, also known as Papelito. He had been part of and witnessed the viciousness and the violence of his own crew, but today he would become a victim of it himself. He did not know what was in store for him when the homies tricked him into coming to the woods. They told him that this was simply him coming to get a discipline for violating the rules. But Elmer had other plans. He was losing his mind in a psychotic way, and there was no other way out. Everything was dealing with taking people's lives. He would find himself beat with a bat and stabbed several times before he took his last breath. The homies would bury his body, his sins, drinking too much, pretending he had higher rank than he really had. But just beating him was not enough for Elmer. He ordered Papelito's head be taken off and his hands and his arms. And then he would throw in his legs for good measure. "Take them all off," he would tell his homies. The weapon of choice, the MS-13 weapon, the machete. In the end, others would lose their lives as well when Elmer wanted them. Santos Antonio Trejo Loomis, he was just a rival, and he would be assassinated in a gang-like type killing. And in 2018, Kevin Abarca Choto, 18 in New Bedford, Mass., would take his last breath over unpaid debts. But the feds were on him. They would show up eventually. And once they show up, it's almost always over. Elmer would be arrested and hauled off to federal court. But who would connect him to the murders and crimes he was charged with? Some of his friends would now become enemies. Of the 8 other gang members indicted for the slayings, 7 would plead guilty, and 5 are planning to testify against him. The one person who allegedly participated in all 6 killings between 2018 and 2022. His homies would get on the stand and point their fingers and tell him that the Jefe was Elmer, that he was the shot caller, that he made all things happen. As the trial began, his attorney Andrew Stewart would tell the jury, who looked as if they didn't believe a word he said, that prosecutors don't have any evidence they need to convict him of the crimes. These gruesome photos don't show that Mr. Alice Condre is guilty of these offenses. Prosecutors would simply smirk at the unconvincing statements. His lawyers would go on to say, these 5 gang members that you will hear from are simply trying to shift blame to serve their own self-interest. But how can he get past the kill list found on his phone, with Pineda Sanchez's name clearly written on it? In most cases, when your friends become your enemies and they testify, they are not usually shifting blame. They are just trying to get out of the life sentences that they are facing by telling the jury everything they were involved in and witnessed. Will Elmer be buried under the jail when the trial is over with? I say yes. Leave a comment and tell us what you think. Urban Crime Chronicles, where we give you nothing but the truth.